All right then, good morning, good morning. Thank you for coming to this, the outer reaches of the Campus Technology Conference to participate in this peer-to-peer panel on cloud computing. This is actually a very, very interesting topic, and I am truly pleased to be here with four most interesting panelists who will offer their thoughts on the topic. My name is Ed Chappell. I'm the moderator for this session, and as the Vice President for Technology at Montclair State, we have a growing and significant investment in various and assorted cloud solutions. We've bought into the Workday. We use Canvas for learning management. We've got, of course, the whole Google Apps suite and many, many others. It's a very big part of our strategy, and I'll probably intervene with a few questions a little later myself. Let me begin by introducing our panelists. Our first speaker is Kyle Bowen, and Kyle is the Director of Education Technology Services at Penn State University. He has a long list of contributions that have furthered the innovative use of technology to benefit our teaching and learning mission. Among these, while at Purdue University as the Director for Informatics, he oversaw development of an impressive suite of learning tools that are designed to address academic challenges experienced by both faculty and students, inside the classroom and out. Kyle is also a widely published author and frequent presenter and media commentator on a wide range of education technology topics. And finally, and most recently, he's an entrepreneur who has co-founded a startup company called SkyPack, and its mission is to provide learning technologies that engage students and do so while reducing the cost of course materials. Our next speaker is Jim Gallup, and Jim is the IT director at Roger Williams University, and in this role for the past 7 years, Jim and his crew are committed to delivering cutting-edge infrastructure to Roger Williams while controlling costs. Part and parcel of this commitment, he and his team have been leaders in the virtual desktop infrastructure space by accomplishing a fully virtualized College of Architecture as one of the first universities in the country to do so. Jim and his team have shown others how students can enjoy greater access to labs and applications at reduced costs to them and to the university. Joining Jim is Ryan Thibault. And Ryan is a systems operations manager also at Roger Williams. Ryan has been providing his technical expertise to Roger Williams with database and applications development efforts for about 12 years. And these efforts improve the overall delivery of technology and services to the campus community. And foremost among his accomplishments is the delivery of high-performance, graphically accelerated virtual desktops to the students in Roger Williams's architecture and engineering programs. And last but certainly not least, we have Dennis Ravenel. He's a senior project director at Harvard University Information Technology. Dennis has, for the past 8 years at Harvard, led many high-profile strategic and tactical projects. At present, he's leading a 3-year program with a $60 million budget that is focused on the student information systems. Dennis's leadership traverses several domains, including consulting, entrepreneurship, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Information Officer, and Technology Officer, and CEO. He is also a frequent presenter at industry meetings and conferences. So without any further ado, I thought we'd get on with the program and hearing from our panelists. By way of a little bit of table setting, I just wanted to introduce you know what? Since I left out a slide, it was the definition of cloud computing. I just want to introduce some refinements to the notion of cloud. There are distinctions to be made between public cloud, private cloud, cloud as managed services, software as a service, and in particular software as a service in these multi-tenancy arrangements. And then there is cloud services that are platform and infrastructure specific, and there is this theme of virtualization, which we'll also hear about today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over first to Kyle and ask that you enjoy the presentation. Kyle, do you want me to get you the mic?
I'll just use this one.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Kyle Bone. I'm the Director of Education Technology Services at Penn State. And I come to this topic really from a kind of high level, not so much from an infrastructure view or a systems view, but rather as a solutions view. In terms of how do we enable our faculty, how do we enable our students with services in teaching and learning that help them be successful. And so when we look at the cloud, I'm often kind of have this kind of nostalgic reminiscing about how we used to buy software. If you remember the experience of buying software, you would go to a store like Best Buy and you'd walk up and down aisles with cardboard boxes that are mostly filled with air, and you'd pay $50 or $60 for one of these boxes, and you'd take it home, and you would spend your afternoon trying to get it to work, right? That was the experience of buying software. But it's completely changed as we have it today. The idea of installing an app has changed how we think about software, right? Even from just its cost. I mean, now, more often than not, it's free, but sometimes it's 99 cents or $1.99. And really, there's some part of us that feels conflicted when we're paying $1.99 for an app, right? Even though we likely paid more for our coffee that morning. But when we begin to think about how that changed how we consume these services, really, there were so many things that influenced that shift. And the cloud was really what did that. What we saw was this convergence between social technologies and mobile technologies, and what we needed was a core framework, some piece of infrastructure that can enable this kind of content delivery and interaction on a wide variety of devices in a wide variety of locations. And really, that's what the cloud meant to us. And so when I look at the cloud, I look at it from three different vantage points. One, from a services standpoint, in terms of services that our faculty and staff come to largely on their own. They consume them and implement them independently. I also look at it from a standpoint of software. So how do we begin to deploy new systems that are delivered out of the cloud? And then lastly, from a systems level, in terms of the delivery of infrastructure, right? Systems that provide platforms from which we can develop and launch new technology. In the services space, we're really talking about your social technologies, right? We have seen for many years the growth of social tools as the means for interaction. And we're seeing those same tools growing interaction both inside and outside of the classroom. But with them come their own challenges, because often faculty and staff come to these solutions entirely on their own, right? So imagine those faculty who use services like Twitter or Facebook inside of their classroom, but use it as a way to engage their students. With that, bring new challenges, such as this effect called the creepy treehouse. Anybody familiar with the creepy treehouse? Heard this before? This is the idea where faculty put students in awkward social positions, usually without knowing it. So the example would be like a faculty member friending a student on Facebook, right? There are certain aspects of this which are, let's just say, creepy, and there are other aspects of it which are entirely innocent, but yet the rules for which is one or the other change on a regular basis. So that becomes the slippery slope in consuming and using these services, is it's unsure what is the latest social norm inside of these environments. What is the latest environment that students have access to, and where is the data from those interactions going, right? So it's fraught with these challenges, but the advantage is that any faculty member, any student can engage in these services immediately. There's another layer of this, like I mentioned, which is the deployment of software. And this is really looking at, these are tools or functions that we would have historically deployed locally on our campuses, but are now hosted out of the cloud and delivered to us as a service. At Penn State, we run services like Yammer to provide interaction between students. We also run this to provide interaction between staff inside of their working groups. We provide services like Qualtrics for delivering surveys and other research instruments. Services like Box as a method for storing files, both from a teaching and learning and administrative capacity. In addition, we're also actively exploring delivery of video and the delivery of video conferencing out of the cloud. And how can we begin to change how these services are offered in an effort to reduce barrier for adoption, right? Simply put. And then in the third realm, which is from a systems level, this really looks at the infrastructure of the cloud, or the cloud as infrastructure. The challenging part of the cloud from this standpoint is that anyone with a credit card is now a sysadmin, right? Plainly spoken. Anyone with a credit card and is able to pay a few dollars a month can run their own systems now, which creates its own interesting complexities. But what it does is it also creates an opportunity to begin to rapidly innovate. So no longer is infrastructure the barrier to innovation, but it's the enabler of it. That it's no longer a matter of can we scale to meet that need. It's knowing that you can. It's just a matter of how do we architect the solution to do it. And so that creates a number of opportunities. And from my past work, I've had the opportunity to work on platforms like Microsoft's Azure platform that makes it very easy to kind of spool up this technology as needed. It makes it possible for us to store content in multiple geographic locations. But again, it enables innovation in a new way, because no longer do we have to worry about, do we have the infrastructure in place, but we know that it's there. With that, I'll transition it back over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to Jim and Ryan from Roger Williams. I'll bring up your presentation. Do you want to use the mics from the table, or you want to stand?
Hi, I'm Jim Gaylor from Roger Williams University, and with me is Ryan Tebow from Roger Williams University. He's a system administrator and actually manager of system administration, and I'm the director of information technology. Roger Williams University, as soon as I figure out how to use this. Roger Williams University is located in Bristol, Rhode Island. We have about 4,300 students on campus, and basically we were called in 2012, around Christmas time of 2012, to have by our architecture department to work with faculty to bring architecture software like AutoCAD, engineering software like SolidWorks into the cloud, more on campus than off at the time, because we're in this affordable excellence program that our president Farish had done, which basically meant we freeze tuition for 4 years of a student. And this was like an add-on to, so a student maybe didn't have to bring as big a laptop as perhaps they had before. The scary part was they wanted to start at the top and work their way down. It would have been much easier to do office products and things like that, but they wanted to go full AutoCAD, every architecture piece of software known, get rid of our labs, have more teaching spaces. So that was the task. So basically, they figured out, okay, well, if there's more classroom spaces and less lab spaces, we could save money on computers. We could use tablet devices and things like that to use. But the problem was we tried everything. We tried, you name it. We tried every software manufacturer, hardware manufacturer. I don't want to name, other things that didn't work, but we tried everything for about 6 months. There was never satisfactory graphics. However, the answer was not going to be it doesn't work. It had to work We had no choice in the matter. No matter what we did, we couldn't go to a meeting and say things didn't work. So out of really desperation, more than anything, we started calling other vendors. We called Dell. Dell sent us to Logical Front, which is a company in Texas. And no, they told us, oh, you can do this no problem, working with NVIDIA, working with Citrix. Just use Citrix with NVIDIA grid cards. They weren't out yet. And this will be just wonderful. We're a little skeptical at first, but we really had no choice. It was either go with them or just tell everybody it failed. And like I said, failure was not an option. So basically, we went that route. Now, what happened was, Logical Front just took care of everything. We actually didn't start until June of 2013. We had to have everything up by the end of August 2013 with Citrix, with these cards that weren't out yet. So we all made deals with NVIDIA. We were a beta site for their card. I think it's still a beta?
Nope.
No, it's just, okay. Basically what we ended up with, by August, we ended up with a very successful project with upwards of 70 people on at one time, doing high-end graphics, AutoCAD. We're going to move our engineering department over there this year. And we think we put continuing studies on, which is the smaller stuff. They had the Word, the Office, things like that. And basically, as you can see, we have a hardware configuration. Now we're going into the Citrix NetScaler, which will allow us to provide off-campus, whatever we can license on and off-campus, we will, so that students get that experience from home, get the experience from their dorms. And it's working really well. Right. Anything like that?
Skip to the future.
Okay. Phase 2, which starts this summer, will be a same configuration as Phase 1, but we're bringing in the engineering department. We're hoping it works out really well. They're really excited about it. Of course, when you do that, you have to ramp up things like wireless, make sure your switches are good. We use Cisco switches, Aruba Wireless, and I think pretty much we're expecting to have the entire university on in about a year's time, and everybody's excited about it. So, thank you.
So our final panelist is Dennis Ravenel, and I'm just going to bring up a couple of slides that Dennis has, and bear with me. I'm not so good at this.
Thank you, Ed. So the cloud is really not something new, right? The cloud, Akamai came on the scene about 15 years ago. I was CIO of .com in 2000. It was a streaming video travel portal. Our production environment was in the Digital Island cloud, and we used their content distribution network. But what's new is that it's reaching higher ed, and it's reaching the public sector, and it's being embraced there. And we'll get to some of the reasons in a minute. But to set the stage, here's a look at what Harvard University IT is doing in the cloud. So one of our biggest implementations about a year ago, we implemented ServiceNow, Software as a Service, as our ITM tool suite. Recently, in the last 6 months or so, we've gone over to Office 365. We're using OpenScholar for departmental websites. We have an enterprise agreement with Amazon Web Services. This is one of those cases where departments, professors, individuals can take advantage of the enterprise agreement and actually stand up their own services in the cloud. Our security organization has gone so far as to create pro forma security worksheets for certification of a service up to level 4. Our level 4 data security is including personally identifiable information. We have a Google Enterprise Agreement. We have the private cloud research computing infrastructure, part of the consortium with MIT, BU, and UMass out at the Mass Green High Performance Research Computing Center in Holyoke. And we're looking at further cloud development. So Hewitt, Harvard University IT, was formed about 3.5 years ago from the merger of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences IT organization and the Central Administration IT organization. And so we're 3.5 years old, and our leadership has long been looking at, what is Hewitt 2.0 going to look like? So last week we had one of our quarterly town halls where the leadership talks about our accomplishments and talks about our goals for the next quarter and the next year. And so this was the slide that Ann Margulies, our CIO, put up and to which she spoke through that session. There's not a lot new here, but this was the kind of earth-shattering headline. Over the next 3 years, it is our intent to have all new services deployed in the cloud and to migrate 75% of our existing services to the cloud. Now, we haven't specified how much of that is going to be public cloud and private cloud, but that's still a pretty audacious goal within 3 years. We have today 4 primary data centers across the campus. So why would Harvard want to do this? Contrary to many, money is an object at Harvard, as it is in many other places. So here are a couple of projects that I've personally been involved in and give you just a frame of reference. Now, I'd ask you not to focus on the specific numbers. The top one is one of the phases, one of the negotiating stages we were in when we were looking at our ITSM tool. And clearly vendor A wanted to buy our business. Rather than look at the numbers themselves, what I'd like you to focus on is the delta between premises-based solutions and cloud solutions. So vendor A was almost $500,000 cheaper once we added in our chargeback cost of infrastructure. It was almost $500,000 cheaper to go to the cloud solution than to do it ourselves. Vendor B, which was a pure SaaS solution, against vendor C, which is one of the big names in ITSM tool suites, as a premises solution, was over $200,000 cheaper to go with a cloud solution. Project I'm involved in today, Student Information Systems project. We've identified a couple of vendors who host the specific tool set that we use, offered as a service. And when we look at some of the costs of using these specific vendors versus putting it in on our own data center, we're looking at, again, $400,000 or $500,000 difference. Now, that's the upfront cost. Think about the maintenance. Anecdote here, 2008, we upgraded our premises-based ITSM tool suite. Again, one of the big names. We were a couple of revisions behind. The project was estimated at about $600,000 and planned to take 6 months. It cost close to $1 million and took almost a year. January 18th of this year, we upgraded our service now from Berlin to Calgary, from the last version to actually what's now one version behind what is their gold version. We did about 6 weeks of internal testing coming up to that. 11 o'clock on Saturday night, we pushed the button, went live with it. We had stood up expanded support, stabilization support for Monday. By middle of the day, we called it off because it was another big non-event. Cost us virtually nothing. So these are some of the considerations. The cloud is not a panacea, though. The devil is in the details, right? So you've got the security considerations. So when you're looking at a vendor and they hand you an SSAE 16, make sure they're not handing you SunGuard or Rackspace's SSAE 16. Make sure they're handing you an SSAE 16 that has looked at the services they're providing. Same thing, ISO 27000, PCI, make sure they have the certifications, and make sure you check. Make sure they're doing penetration testing. Portability is another big issue, right? If you deploy it in Amazon's cloud and you decide a year from now that was the wrong decision, can you move it to Microsoft Azure or can you bring it back in-house? Make sure that in your agreements you have an exit strategy. What happens to your data when you bring it back in? And finally, control. Make sure that, again, when you're negotiating the contracts, the scope, make sure you cover all the things you're going to need. Otherwise, they'll nickel and dime you as you make changes and ask for things that are outside that scope. And then finally, keep in mind data sovereignty, right? If you host with someone who's hosting in a country other than the U.S., your data is subject to laws that are not U.S. laws. So those are some of the things that you have to consider when you're looking at the cloud. So those are, that is what I have to offer.
Thank you, Dennis. We're going to now transition to the Q&A. We've left plenty of time for that. We have still 15 minutes. So we're inviting questions from the floor. I'm going to take one of the microphones down to the floor, but I thought I'd kick it off with a question specifically for Kyle. Kyle's focus on delivering content to facilitate teaching and learning is realized through this company called SkyPack that he's invented, or co-founded, I should say. And I'd like to know a little bit about how cloud has been an element of that solution.
Sure. So that's a critical aspect. So when we begin to look at the delivery of content to students virtually all over the world, how do we overcome kind of the infrastructure barriers that enable us to do that? Especially when we start to consider kind of the vast array of devices and how devices in other countries aren't the same as the devices that we have here, that the networks aren't the same as we have here, so that in an effort to deliver these services and deliver this content, it's important to have partners that provide the infrastructure to do that. And so in SkyPack's case, it's deployed on Azure as its platform, because it enables content to be delivered from kind of regional locations around the world so that we can help ensure that as faculty want to author and create their content and deliver it in different locations, that they can quickly and easily do that based on whatever the kind of local need is in that particular space. But at the same time, realizing that institutions have requirements around where their data or where their content is being stored. And so I know even at Penn State, when we look at these kinds of cloud agreements, one of the aspects we'll look at is to make sure that our content isn't going outside of the country. And so looking at these kinds of services as a way to provide that global reach, but at the same time enable kind of the policy setting that happens locally. And I think that's one of the important aspects to look at as we continue to explore cloud delivery.
Thank you. I feel a song coming on, but I'd happily give up the mic to anyone with a question.
As an application developer, I can't tell people enough how powerful I see platforms like Azure and software as a service vendors. But ultimately, I get the question of, what are the sysadmins going to do now? When I stand up an Azure server, I do what I need to do with that server. How do you see those roles changing for the sysadmins, and how do you respond to that when a president or a CFO says, well, what are those guys doing now?
Great question. Who wants at it?
Great question. The question was, what happens to folks who have skills that may be displaced by some of this, right? And so I mentioned the town hall last week. One of the key members of that leadership team that presented to us was the Harvard University IT director of HR. And a part of that plan includes what do we need to do to bring these folks up in terms of skills to the new technologies. One of the fellows I worked with very closely when we went to ServiceNow was our previous, our legacy platform administrator. When we started heading down the path of going with ServiceNow, he was petrified. What we realized is that his skills were perfectly transferable into administering the ServiceNow platform. So it's a question of providing the tools and providing the support for these folks to learn the new skills, to make the positions available to them. And I think that's a key component of any responsible organization as it goes down these paths.
Other questions?
I can just project. I guess I'm directing this mostly for John at Harvard. Can you talk a little bit about your enterprise Amazon Web Services? Like what specific benefits have you seen from going with that? And also, did you look into Azure as well? Did you choose one versus the other?
I can't answer a number of those questions because I wasn't involved. So what I've shared with you mostly is stuff that I directly had knowledge of. So the question is how did you evaluate and how did you decide to go with AWS versus Azure and those kinds of things? I think that was part of the question, right?
Yeah. We're probably doing some of the same things that you are doing, but I think a little behind. And frankly, we're struggling with what exactly was the benefit of really getting an enterprise agreement with AWS versus just having everybody have individual accounts. But I have another question for you if you want to try this one, which was related to ServiceNow. And again, specifically what modules you're using and kind of what you have seen to be the most effective there.
Let me step back to the previous question for a second, and then I lost it. Oh, why go with an enterprise agreement with Amazon versus let everybody do their own? I think there are two key pieces to that, right? One is, again, you run into the problem of everybody buying web services, buying servers and buying space on a credit card, and you lose control. And I think the control is the second piece of it. So by having an enterprise agreement and having a single point of control, you at least know what you have out there and can begin to manage it a little bit, as opposed to having everybody buying these on their own credit card. As far as the ITSM, the ServiceNow piece, we have an enterprise license. We have everything effectively except orchestration, discovery, and I think there's one other thing that they've come out fairly recently with. We launched with incident management. A few months later, we went into we turned up change management. We were doing some knowledge management and some request management opportunistically, and then we had a major effort to launch release management. We are now doing some things with specific request management with our telecom folks, where we've done e-bonding with Verizon and replaced some tools that we were leasing from Verizon. And at the end of the day, it's about money, it's about service, because we're getting a much higher level of service to our end users through this platform. It's about communications, coordination, collaboration. All these tools have really helped us in those areas. Our Hewitt Project Management Office is prototyping. They have an Access database tool that they use for reporting on strategic projects now. They're piloting moving that into the ServiceNow project management module.
I actually have one for Ryan. I think this microphone died, so we get it. Kudos to both of you for doing a virtual desktop initiative with the singularly most complex set of applications. In delivering, did you find device-specific impediments to success? Did you find device-specific impediments to success? Were you having difficulties with various platforms in delivering to the students?
We found a handful of software applications that we just were not able to work with for various reasons. They either don't run virtualized, or we've had a couple of software programs that still require Windows 95 or Windows 98, and it's just not going to work. But as far as like the devices that students have brought, we've had very few problems. There have been a couple of students that I can remember that came with very specific VPN installed on their devices for their laptops, and that conflicted with the receiver. But more or less any device that the students have brought, as far as it be tablet, be it be iOS or Android, even Windows tablets now, it's been pretty seamless across that. As long as the receiver and or HTML5 runs on it, it's been pretty good.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Any final thoughts or comments from our panelists? Well then, with that, I want to thank everyone for coming. It's really been